Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the special council meeting of Tuesday, December 15th. I'll call the meeting to order and ask for a motion, please, for the adoption of the agenda. Councillor Dunn, second by Councillor O'Reilly. All in favor? That's passed. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest on today's agenda? Seeing none, I will now recess the meeting so Kawartha Lakes Halliburton Housing Corporation can have their annual general meeting and turn it over to their chair, Pat Dunn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and welcome to the shareholders meeting for the Kawartha Lakes Halliburton Housing Corporation, our annual general meeting. To start off, can I have a motion to adopt the agenda? Shareholder Riley, Councillor Elmsley, all those in favor? That motion is carried. Deputations and presentations. Kawartha Lakes Housing Governance Operational Review, Judy Lightbody, Housing Services. Is she here today, or is that you, Hope? Oh, there she is. Welcome, Judy.
Thank you.
You're up. We're ready for you whenever you
I'm
are.
up.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. There's my slides. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for allowing me to present today on the KLH Housing Corporation Governance and Operational Review. My name is Judy Lightbound, and I am the Managing Director of HSC Business Solutions. Next slide, please. So this review is really anchored by the KLH Housing Corporation's 10-year strategic plan. Next slide, please. Sorry, you have to click twice, I think. And the strategic priorities that are contained in that plan. Within those 5 strategic priorities is the priority to invest in our people. And under that priority, HSC was retained to undertake the governance and operational review of KLH Housing Corporation, with the goal really to make sure that the corporation is best positioned to achieve those strategic priorities. Next slide, please. As the corporation positions itself for growth, it really wishes to ensure that it has the corporate and leadership structure best suited for that growth. So our review focused in 3 areas: the corporate structure, governance, and operations. And I'll be presenting at a high level the process that we went through to look at each of those and the recommendations in each area. Next slide, please. This work was really done under the guidance of a project team, which met monthly for about the last 6 months. The project team consisted of 9 members, 2 representatives from the KLH Housing Corporation Board of Directors, 2 members from the service manager, as well as the chief administrative officer and the treasurer for both the city and the county. I do want to thank the project team and Hope Lee as the project chairperson and lead for their invaluable assistance during this process, for all of their insights and viewpoints that are really critical to make sure that this report is relevant and usable. Next slide, please. Just very briefly, this is the methodology, and it's outlined in much more detail in the report. It was very much a collaborative process, as I mentioned, very much overseen and engaged with the project team throughout this process, all the way through project initiation, through the review, and then the preliminary findings, the draft report, and the final report. Next slide, please. I'll just spend a couple of minutes talking about the review and assessment process. In each of the areas of the corporate structure, the governance, and the operations, we collected and reviewed all of the various documents, took a look at the different structures that are in place. We met with the staff that were involved in these processes, both the staff, the senior management staff, as well as the staff working under the CEO, housing manager. We considered the staff functions, and then we also undertook a sector scan just to understand what else was happening in the sector in each of those 3 areas. Next slide, please. I won't go into this in detail, but I do just want to note the The depth of the study, we did take a look at 7 different corporate structures just to understand what structures are out there that might best support KLH Housing Corporation's strategic goals. And then we also looked at a number of organizational structures to best understand which best provides that alignment between the KLH Housing Corporation structure and as I said, the achievement of your growth strategies. Next slide, please. A key element of this work was engaging with the sector to understand where there might be some good practice, policy process and system improvements. And we were very fortunate to be able to work closely with Northumberland County, Peterborough Housing Corporation, City of London Housing Development Corporation, Housing York, Haldimand Norfolk County, and the County of Simcoe, as well as engaging with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing. Next slide, please. After spending significant time undertaking the review, it became very clear KLH Housing Corporation has established a very strong foundation for growth. You're very well established and you've got a number of key achievements and key structures in place that really position you well. That includes sort of your knowledgeable staff, engaged board, clear strategic vision, and a real focus on financial viability. So our work really wasn't in looking at wholesale changes, but finding ways to make slight modifications that ensure that you're on strong footing in order to achieve your strategic priorities. Next slide, please. So I'll just briefly discuss the recommendations. I'll do it in each of the areas. So the first set of recommendations are around the corporate structure. And as I mentioned, we did look at 7 different corporate structures. And our first recommendation is that KLH Housing Corporation actually retain the current corporate legal structure. That structure is working very well. It allows the corporation to do everything that it envisions under its strategic plan. And it's working very effectively. While we were looking at the corporate structure and in concert with the project team, it became very clear that there was concern about KLH Housing Corporation's ability to access debt. So our second recommendation is really around continuing to do the work that has already begun to look at a debt management strategy for the corporation. We're aware that work is underway with the city treasurer to identify debt capacity and by the county treasurer to develop a debt management policy. So we suggest continuing to work with the city and county treasurers just to understand the debt capacity, both within the provincially set annual repayment limit and the debt to revenue ratio, as well as pursuing the establishment of a dedicated debt limit for KLH Housing Corporation. And the reason that that's important is just for planning purposes. Given the development goals that KLH Housing Corporation has, there's a need to understand the debt ceiling that you're operating within. We did take a look at the possibility of naming the county as a shareholder and whether or not that was legally possible. We did connect with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing, and they've confirmed that that is well within the abilities of the service manager to do without the involvement of the province or the minister. So we are recommending that engagement continue with the county just to understand what role they may wish to play with a shareholder and whether or not that would allow an increased debt capacity. Next slide, please. The second set of recommendations relate to the governance structure. And I do want to note that KLH Housing Corporation has an incredibly strong governance structure. You've got an incredibly diverse and strong board of directors and strong board policies governing their operations. So that is a fantastic foundation from which to start. The first recommendation that we have, and I've grouped the recommendations into 2 main areas, although there are 5 recommendations, is around strengthening board diversity. Next slide, please. And in that area, we have 2 recommendations. The first is designating 2 tenant representative positions, one from the city and one from the county, just again to strengthen that diversity and ensure that you're getting viewpoints from both the city and the county. And the second is to prioritize the positions that are set aside specifically for area residents on the KLH Housing board for individuals who are not city or county council members. I do want to make a distinction here. We understand that the KLH Housing Board has really benefited from having municipal politicians on our board, and this recommendation does not change that. We recognize that there's a strong value gained there. This is really trying to, as I mentioned, set aside board, increasing board diversity, recognizing that there are positions already set aside for city and county council members on the board. The second area of recommendations is in future-proofing the existing strong city-corporate relationship. Next slide, please. And in that area, what we really want to do is to strengthen an already existing strong relationship between the city and county by ensuring that that is papered, recognizing that you have a very good relationship, and that relationship is built on history, trust, collaboration, and goodwill. And we recognize that any organization is inevitably going to face turnover amongst board members and senior staff. And being able to articulate those relationships through a purchase services agreement and a shareholder direction is a sector best practice. And we have provided a number of samples of those shareholder direction and purchase services agreements to staff. The final recommendation is just updating the governance policies to reflect these recommendations. Next slide, please. And the next set of recommendations relate to operations. Next slide, please. And I am going to spend a little bit of time talking first about the first recommendation, which is splitting the CEO, KLA Housing Corporation role and the housing manager from the city role. Next slide, please. As part of our process, we worked very closely with the current incumbent to really understand that role, as well as I mentioned, the senior staff that this role reports to, as well as the staff reporting into this role. We strongly recommend, given the extent of both of the dual roles, that this role be split. As you can see from this slide, both of these roles are incredibly significant as it is, and we expect both roles to expand and grow. We expect the manager, housing services at the city, to role as the service manager begins to implement both the 10-year housing and homelessness plan, the housing master plan, and the asset management plan. And then we also see the CEO role for KLH Housing Corporation continuing to grow and expand as well as you're implementing on your very aggressive strategic plan. We also see splitting this role as being an opportunity to better support the staff below both of these functions and ensure that sufficient time is set aside to be able to achieve the strategic goals in both of these areas. Next slide, please. So our rationale for splitting this CEO role is, as I mentioned, really recognizing the complex and growing workload of both of these positions. We also believe that that a new structure can really support the alignment of workload through ensuring that those two roles work very closely together under the direction of the Director of Human Services. And we believe that this allows KLH Housing Corporation to hire for the unique skill set that they need for that role, particularly in supporting the delivery of the strategic plan and your development aspirations, including skill sets around collaboration, partnership building, and focusing on new development. Next slide, please. So the recommended new structure would look a little bit like this, where you've got a dedicated housing manager role and a CEO role reporting up through the Director of Human Services, with those two roles working very much hand in glove as a team to ensure that the strategic plans continue to be aligned. The titles for these two roles can absolutely change. What is critical here is that you have a dedicated service manager role and a dedicated KLH Housing Corporation role. Next slide, please. And then back to the other recommendations under operations. The second recommendation there is to develop a CEO transition plan. And that's really just to establish a plan to ensure business and leadership continuity and that sufficient time is built into that process to allow a transition. The third recommendation is to continue the work that's already begun at the corporate level on a talent management plan to proactively plan for future leaders. And that's really assessing and supporting the readiness of staff to assume greater responsibility and to develop some individual development plans. And then the final recommendation here relates very much to the housing operations, not just at KLH Housing Corporation, but also with the city, and speaks to working to enhance human resources understanding of the unique nature of housing operations and the complex needs of the vulnerable residents that housing serves, and really encouraging human resources to consider ways to enhance the education and skills of particular positions to recognize the unique nature of these roles, and for the corporation to have input into the position descriptions and job requirements to ensure that they're getting the right people. Next slide, please. And I will stop there and see if there are any questions.
Do we have any questions? Go ahead, Pat.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chairman. As first recommendation, you're talking about dedicated debt and debt ceilings. I realize it's early stages, but we're talking about, in recommendation 1, we're talking about dedicated debt and debt ceiling. Are we going to see more of that, or we're just early stages in that, and when do you anticipate that that might be coming forward? To whomever.
What I can, sorry, yeah, no, I can start this. I'm not sure that I can finish the answer, but our recommendation is really to continue the work that has already begun. As I mentioned, both the treasurers for the city and the county have already started turning their minds to this. And we worked very closely with them throughout the project team. And as we dove deeper into this, I would expect further work would be coming forward in 2021, but I'll turn this over to Hope.
Yeah, so Judy's correct, and some of the work has already started. If you actually look at the report that's in the agenda, there's a schedule of when pieces will be implemented, and we're gearing towards Q2 of 2021 for that work to finish up.
And we've been joined by the city treasurer, so I think Ms. Dines is going to have something to say.
Yes, so I'm just not sure if you guys understand the implications of the debt limit. The city has a debt limit that encompasses KLHC, our tax levy debt, our water and wastewater debt. And so we are in developing the long-term financial plan coming forward in, I'm not sure if it's the first or second quarter of 2021. And we will present a long-term financial plan that will include debt limits for KLHHC, as well as water and wastewater and tax levy implications as well. As you can appreciate, we have a lot of demand for debt, water and wastewater. The water rate study will be coming to council as well, and it indicates some increased levels of debt as well. So we want to make sure that we've captured all of that before we give KLHHC their own debt ceiling at this point. So that is coming in the next half a year anyway.
Thank you. Any further questions? Ms. Lightbound, you're up again.
Sorry, if there are no other questions, that was the last slide of my presentation. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to receive the report? Councillor Richardson, Councillor Elmsley, all those in favor? That motion's carried. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is 68 Lindsay Housing First Works and CEO Lee.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I'll just wait for the slides to be put up. Thanks. So 68 Lindsay Street, the building located at the corner of Lindsay and Queen Street, is the new City of Kawartha Lakes facility. That includes both an office component and a residential component. So KLH Housing has entered into a lease with the city for the residential portion of that building. And in June of 2019, KLH Housing began to move tenants in to the 24 one-bedroom units that are in that facility. Next slide, please. So 26 community members are currently housed at 68 Lindsay Street, and there's another 2 households that have been successfully transferred to other KLH housing, resulting in 28 members of our community ending their homelessness. Next slide. So the residential component of 68 Lindsay Street is a permanent supportive housing program. It's for community members transitioning out of homelessness. Well, the first of its kind here in the city of Kawartha Lakes, the model and approach is successful nationally. The program, which uses a housing first and harm reduction philosophy, provides a home and then supports for members of our community to transition out of homelessness. So the one qualifying factor to be housed in this building is homelessness. The support funding is provided through Home for Good. That's a program that's funded by the provincial government, and the intensive housing supports are provided on site through an agency called Forecast. The agency Forecast specializes in providing supports the tenants need to stay successfully housed. So 68 Lindsay is currently home to 26 tenants. 4 of those are youth, 2 are seniors, and 80% of the tenants are women. Next slide, please. So prior to moving in, tenants had significant bouts of homelessness over a period of time. On average, they had been without a home for 28 months or more than 2 years. 1 had no place to call home for 7 years, and 5 had been sleeping outside before moving into this building. Next slide. Tenancies are successful. 13 have been housed more than a year, and another 7 are very close to their 1-year anniversary. Although not in this building, there's another 2 households that have transferred to a more suitable sized unit where they too continue to be successfully housed. Next slide, please. So since moving in, tenants have benefited from the support of skilled and compassionate staff and the sense of security that comes with having a safe and stable place to call home. Tenants feel supported by staff and they enjoy having staff on site. Tenants feel safe and comfortable in their units and are satisfied with the building and the location. Next slide, please. So partnerships with Kawartha Lakes Police Service and the Kawartha Lakes Paramedic Services have supported clients to feel safe and to build positive relationships with those emergency services workers. This was probably a much different relationship before being housed. Next slide, please. So having a permanent and safe place to live has allowed clients to engage in meaningful daily activities, build confidence, and start to reframe their lives. Next slide. The success to date is reflected through both staff and tenants. This building, although still very new to our community, means there are fewer members of our community struggling with homelessness, fewer interactions with emergency services, and most of all, more people have a safe place to call home, giving them the ability to move on with their lives, something that many of us take for granted day after day. Next slide. So recognizing the success of this model locally and those in our community who need this type of housing to end their homelessness, KLH Housing plans to build on this success by incorporating more permanent supportive housing into development plans going forward. So that's the end of the presentation, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Can I have a motion to receive the deputation? Councillor Ashmore, Councillor Yeo. Forget names up here all of a sudden. All those in favor? All right. And I assume there's no other questions from Ms. Lee. Okay. Next order of business, the approval of the minutes from previous meetings. I can have a motion to approve the open session meetings from the annual general meeting November 19th. Mayor Latham, Councillor Elmsley. No discussion. All those in favor? That motion is carried. Motion to receive or to resolve that the confidential closed minutes for the annual general meeting of the shareholders on November 19th, 2019 be approved as circulated. All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Okay, under new business, we have the report for governance and operations. The printed motion is that report 2020-036, governance and operations review report and recommendations be received. That the recommendations included in attachment A to report 2020-036 and summarized in Table 1 are approved. The outcome and timeline detailed in Table 2 of report 2020-036 be approved, and the report and recommendations be presented to the City of Kawartha Lakes Council during their special meeting on December 15th, 2020. Can I have a mover? Councillor O'Reilly, Councillor Elmsley, all those in favor? And that motion's carried. Item number 5.2, the printed motion is Resolve Report 2020-037, Kawartha Lakes Housing Corporation 2018-2019 Annual Report, be received for information purposes. Moved by Mayor Leatham, seconded by Councillor Richardson. All those in favor? And that motion's carried. 5.3, the 2020-038, 2020 to 2029 Strategic Plan. Resolve the report 2020-038, Kawartha Lakes Housing Corporation 2020 to 2029 Strategic Plan be received. Moved by Councillor Seymour Fagan, seconded by Councillor Elmsley. All those in favor, and that motion is carried. If I get going too fast for you, just let me know. Report 2020-039, 2019 Audited Financial Statements, Auditor's Report and Audited Financial Statement. Resolve that Report 2020-039, Audited Financial Statement be received, and that the Audited Report be received and the Audited Financial Statement for 2019 be approved as circulated. Moved by Councillor Elmsley, seconded by Councillor Richardson. All those in favor? And that motion is carried. Item 5.5, appointment of the auditor for 2020. Resolve that Deloitte and Touche LLP be appointed as auditors for the year ending December 31, 2020 at the quoted total annual fee of up to $10,500 plus HST. Moved by Councillor O'Reilly, seconded by Councillor Ashmore. All those in favor? Motion is carried. And can I have a motion to adjourn this meeting? Moved by Councillor Elmsley, seconded by Councillor Richardson. All those in favor? This meeting is adjourned.
Thanks, Chair Dunn. I'll call the meeting, special council meeting back to order, and we'll deal with the reports. We have a report 7.1. The motion that reports CAO 2020-008 KLH Housing Governance and Operations Review and Recommendations be received, that the recommendations included in Appendix A and as summarized in Table 1 of Report CAO 2020-0 be approved, and that the CAO be authorized to lead the implementation of those recommendations identified in Table 2 of Report CAO 2020-008 within the timelines identified. Councillor Elmsley, you'll move it as printed. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Dunn. Is there anything, CAO, your report, do you want to give us a quick overview, a quick update? Just go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you. Just a couple of quick comments. So you may remember that this was one of a number of modernization reviews that the city undertook. It was mentioned in the previous presentation that review took approximately 6 months. It was quite consultative and very intensive in terms of looking at best practices, looking at our service and making sure that we were operating in a modern and efficient manner. And so I thank the consultants and certainly the project team that you saw earlier listed. I think it was a great, focused, and very streamlined review. The recommendations that I'm putting forward to you really mirror now what the board and the shareholder is both recommending through to you now. And as you can appreciate, you saw in the previous presentation, these recommendations impact both KLH themselves as a corporation and also the Corporation of the City of Kawartha Lakes, or the city, which is why you're getting this incremental reporting through to you. We will be, I'll just touch on the question with respect to debt management. It was one that we're very focused on. We will be bringing back, as the treasurer said, a debt strategy for all of our operations, us as the service manager included. And you will probably see in the consultant's report where it talks a little bit about even integrating the county as a way to manage our debt, because we see this sort of as a, I'll use the term good debt, sort of taking on where you have revenues that can pay back that debt over a period of time. And so we think that there is some value in looking at some dedicated debt in order to meet your growth and development strategies. There are a number of recommendations with respect to structure. I think probably the only thing I want to highlight is going through this experience, and again, as a modernization review, I think what it really confirmed is that we run a really good operation generally as is. The recommendations are there to really help us to modernize and now expand on sort of our growth and development objectives and priorities. But when we look at ourselves sort of with other service managers throughout the province, this group is very well regarded, and so I wanted to take that opportunity to brag on behalf of our service manager and KLH. I think with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll just again support the recommendations from the board and shareholder, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, sir. Any questions for CAL regarding the report? Seeing none, we have a mover and a... Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Dunn.
Just a quick comment. The diversity of the board is going to be brought in as members retire. In Kawartha Lakes, we already have a member that is a client, so we've covered that base already. In Haliburton, they have members already in positions. We're not going to kick anybody out, but once a position comes forward, that's how we're going to fill that. The other thing is that was the increase in personnel, and we recognize, especially the council members there, that it was an additional cost both to the corporation and to the city/county. But it's time. The system only works because of the person we currently have in there. She's learned the job through experience, but both organizations have grown to such an extent that it's time they each had their own individual manners. And after a long discussion, it was supported by the board of directors. And I just want to put that out there that we think it's a good idea.
Well said, thank you. And I like the diversification too. I think that's a great idea going forward. So we have any other questions? We have a mover and a seconder. All in favor? That's passed. No correspondence. Confirming bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the December 15th, 2020 special council meeting, please. Councillor O'Reilly, seconded by Councillor Elmsley. All in favor? That's passed. Motion to adjourn. Councillor Richardson, seconded by Councillor Yeo. All in favor? We are adjourned. We'll see you back here at 1 o'clock.